I regularly make it, says Stuart. For lunch, though? Yeah, of course. Fair enough. Still, it's hard to argue with Joni, isn't it, really? Cleo Sol, Miss Romantic. Now then, David Bowie's Pin-Ups album, as I said before, it's a kind of stopgap, really, because you had to keep going, keeping the public eye in those days. Aladdin Sane, which we celebrated the 50th anniversary of with pianist Mike Garson in April 73. Diamond Dogs comes May 74. So in between is Pin-Ups, his covers album of the beat songs, really, that, the 64-67 period of London, which inspired him, and he was involved in so much. Songs by The Pretty Things, Them, Floyd, Who, Easy Beats, Yardbirds, Kinks, things like that. Produced with Ken Scott, who produces Iggy, worked with Bowie a lot. Must have been an interesting atmosphere. They recorded it at a chateau in France, and this was just after Trevor Bolder and Woody Woodmansey had been sacked on stage from the Ziggy Stardust tour, or the announcement of it was sort of made on stage. They hadn't told them before, so their services were dispensed with, and so for this, David Bowie asked Ainsley Dunbar to play the drums and Jack Bruce to play the bass, and Jack Bruce couldn't do it, so Trevor Bolder came and did it anyway. That must have been an interesting time in the studio, mustn't it? But anyway, Bowie's only covers album. He did do the odd cover. And of course, famously, the cover is the world's first supermodel, Twiggy, resting her head on Bowie's shoulder in sort of all that strange makeup and things, which was taken in Paris while they were there for the recording sessions. And there's a musical called Close Up, written by Ben Elton at the Mernier Chocolate Factory in London, which is about Twiggy's life. And so we will talk about that, but we will also talk about that photo session for the cover of Pin-Ups with Twiggy. How cool is this? After we've heard the single from the album, originally a hit for the Merseys in 1966, Sorrow. That's David Bowie with Sorrow, which was a hit for the Merseys in 1966, although the original the year before, technically by the McCoys, from Pin-Ups. These songs are the beat songs of 60s London that soundtracked Bowie's formative years and inspired him on that scene. Do the same songs mean the same for you, Twiggy?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, number one, I can't believe it's 50 years. Time flies when you're having fun. But yes, and actually we've just co-produced a musical about my life, and we use Ben Elton, who wrote and produced it, uses a lot from that period, because obviously 1966 was when I was discovered. And it's been lovely because I've had so many letters from people saying it's taken them back to that era, and what great music. It was great music in the 60s, wasn't it? And the 70s. So
tell us about Close Up then, the musical. I mean, what's the arc of it? Where do we find the young Twiggy at the beginning of the show? Presumably still as Leslie. Or Twigs was your school nickname, wasn't it?
It wasn't from school, actually. It was from a first boyfriend's brother who used to tease me about my skinny legs.
Right.
And it kind of stuck. And then when it was written about in the newspaper, that was me, Twiggy for life. Yeah. Yeah. But it hasn't done badly for me.
It's done okay. So where do we find you at the start of the show?
Well, it jumps around a bit, but it starts when I was born. And it goes through to 1983 when I did a Gershwin musical on Broadway, My One and Only. But obviously the big part is the middle 60s. That's why we've got all these great songs from that period. And Ben Elton, who wrote and directed it, has very cleverly inserted them in, specific moments.
Yeah.
But the audience love the song. I mean, it's so lovely to watch their reaction.
Yeah, well, it's like a jukebox musical as well as telling your story, isn't it?
Exactly.
I mean, the swinging 60s, I was around in the 60s, I was born in the late 50s, but you were there at the very centre of it. But you were so young. It's staggering to think of it now. You were what, 16, 17? So I wondered, was it a continuous round of parties and gigs, or were you shielded from it at all? Were you being looked after?
I think that did go on. I quite honestly, I mean, number one, I was, as you say, I was incredibly young and incredibly kind of unsophisticated, and all I'd done was grow up, live with my family and gone to school, which it was a very happy existence. So when that whole thing, and it kind of happened within like 3 weeks, 1 week I was at school, the next week I was being photographed because Leonard cut my hair.
Yeah.
And then a journalist saw it from the Daily Express and did this whole article saying, I named this girl Twiggy the face of 66. And that was the day in February 1966 when my life changed forever.
Yeah. I mean, obviously since that time, we've been through all kinds of things, and the Me Too movement and everything, about sort of powerful men preying on young women. And how was it for you? Did you feel safe in that world at that time?
Well, I did, because I had the most wonderful dad, Norman. Yeah. And he was from Bolton in Lancashire, and he was...
I'm from Bolton.
You're not.
I am.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Good old Norman. You can always rely on guys from Bolton, Twigs.
But I agree with you. I said that to Peter Kay, who I worked with a few years back, because he's from Bolton.
He is.
And I love him. He's so lovely. But my dad, he was really grounded. He was really sensible. And he was a wonderful dad, because my mum had mental health issues, not badly all the time, but she went up and down. So my dad was my rock.
Yeah.
And so when this whole thing suddenly happened to me out of the blue, I had to get permission to leave school, obviously, because I was so young. Because I was being offered jobs in Paris, and amazing work was coming through. And he said, if I stop you doing it, you may end up hating me. This is a chance in a million. He said, but the only reason I'll let you do this is if somebody always accompanies you to the studio. Because obviously, being a man of a certain age, he kind of knew what can go on.
Sure. Yeah.
Which I was totally unaware of. I was, I wasn't like 16-year-olds today who are much more sophisticated and grown up, and with the internet, everything. It was a much more innocent time in many ways. So I always had a chaperone.
Well done, Dad. Well done. At what point obviously, we jumped to pin-ups, which is 50 years ago, so a bit later. But when did you first meet David Bowie? Were you friends?
No, never met him. I was a huge fan. And I can't remember, it was before I met him, but he did an amazing song called Driving Saturday.
Exactly.
Which I'm sure you know about.
Yeah, Twig the Wonder Kid.
Yeah, and I remember being in my kitchen and it came on the radio. And it was like, oh my God, I think he said my name. And then I waited till it played again to the because it's in the chorus. She sighed like Twig the Wonder Kid. And I was like, oh my God, David Bowie mentioned me in a song. I was so excited, and I went out and bought it.
Had anybody called you that before that, Twig the Wonder Kid?
No.
Did it catch on after that?
Some people do use it, in journalists and things. Right. It's very flattering. It's very nice. Yeah.
So how did the photo come about?
I was asked by Vogue, English Vogue, if I would do a cover photograph with David Bowie. And I said, absolutely, what a brilliant idea. And he was recording, it was probably pin-ups in Paris. So I went to Paris, and they had this incredible makeup artist who decided to do our faces as masks. If you look at the cover, we've got a kind of mask painted. I mean, they're beautifully done. Yeah. And we did the photograph and had a lovely couple of days in Paris and went out to dinner. I mean, he was extraordinarily amazing man. I mean, I was very excited to meet him and very nervous because, when you're a big fan of somebody. Yeah. I mean, when he hit the scene you would have been 10 years younger than me, probably. Yeah. When was Ziggy Stardust? Was that late 60s?
72, wasn't it? So there's then I would be 14, and it absolutely hit me between the eyes.
I was 22 in 72. I just thought he was so unlike anybody, and he was so extraordinary. So I was kind of in awe of meeting him, but he was such a sweet, lovely man. Incredibly bright, incredibly well read,
and very funny. I always found people were always surprised.
Lovely.
Yeah, a really playful sense of humour, didn't he?
No, he was a gorgeous, gorgeous man, and taken from us far too soon.
Did he do a lot of photographs? Did he photograph? Because famously, Ziggy Stardust, they did half a dozen photos outside in the rain in black and white, and coloured them later, and that was it. Was this a long session?
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
We are talking 50 years ago. I can't remember. It probably took longer to put the makeup on than take the photo. But I do think it's the most wonderful photo. So anyway, we were commissioned by Vogue to do it. And David was very happy about that. And I was very happy about it. It was going to be the cover at British Vogue. And then a few weeks later, we heard from British Vogue that the editor, a male editor at Vogue, had decided he couldn't put a man on the cover of British Vogue. So they were not going to use the photo. And I was like, are you insane? Are you insane? This is one of the biggest stars of the moment, an amazing man. Plus, he's wearing makeup, so you can actually credit him with if you're worried about credits. But they would not budge. And I said to them, you'll sell more copies of British Vogue than you ever have imagined in your life, because you'll get every Bowie fan in the world, buying it. Anyway, they wouldn't budge. More fool them is what I say, because Davey said, well, don't worry, let them fuff about, and I'll put it on the cover of Pin-Ups, which is the album he was recording. So actually it's had that photograph has had a much longer life, because every time Pin-Ups is re-released in another format, there it pops up again.
Yeah, it's an iconic image, and so well, it's lovely to talk to you, and good luck with the musical, which I know is going down well and runs till mid-November.
Yeah, well, we're almost sold out.
Lovely to talk to you. We'll finish off with another track from Pin-Ups. This, I think, in some ways, the first psychedelic pop song, "Shapes of Things" by the Yardbirds. Thanks, Twiggy.
Thanks.